In 399 BC, Socrates was sentenced to death after he refused exile. His crime was impiety and the corruption of the youth. Very little thought is put into this moment in history. Academic philosophers like to focus on the potentially somewhat abstract questions of Platonic dialogues. What is beauty? What is justice? Can virtue be taught? And so on and so forth. Historians like to focus on dates, names, events, and so on. Very little harmony between the two is ever truly conducted. In this course, this is exactly what I attempt to do. We look at a number of Socratic dialogues in the context of why did this society sentence this man to death? Why was the pedagogy which Socrates was implementing at the time so destabilizing, so threatening, and so divisive? Secondarily, why are so many of Plato's texts so pedagogical? Why is the theme of educating and the, I suppose you could say, slightly more controversial task of educating the next generation of leaders intrinsically a philosophical task? Think of the Republic. The Republic's a philosophical book, but it's basically a book designing a society around the pedagogy and cultivation of the philosopher kings. Far from a bunch of kind of nerdy academics sitting around speculating about abstract affairs, what we see with Plato, with a real reading of Plato, is a very grounded and concrete task which encompasses the totality of human life, but it encompasses that totality around a teleology, a sort of becoming of a society, but also a society which is centered around and led by the philosopher king. Therefore, Plato's pedagogy and the pedagogical method which Socrates was implementing in Athens at the time was essentially what I'm referring to as elite pedagogy. That doesn't mean that it's elitist in the sense of it excludes people for arbitrary reasons, but the entire point of it is the production of a rulership, we could say a kind of nobility, not necessarily a nobility of bloodline, but a nobility of sorts under philosophical praxis. Reading a selection of Plato's shorter dialogues, such as Alcibiades, Lysis, Laches, we see a dialogue between Socrates and a younger member of Athenian society, such as Lysis or Alcibiades. And in these dialogues, we see not only an inquiry into the nature of good leadership or friendship, but we also see a sort of method, a praxis being installed between the elder and the younger teachers and students, the more experienced and the more inexperienced, and so on and so forth. This course reads these dialogues, and it reads them with the usual inquiry into the nature of a virtue, such as ambition, leadership, courage, friendship, and so forth. But it also incorporates this inquiry into a specific virtue with a inquiry into the more practical methodology, logic, and dynamic that Socrates was experimenting with in that time. What is the focus? What is the telos? What is the end? What is the meaning of this method? What is the reason that it was controversial? Why did it provoke a response, ultimately leading to the kind of martyrdom, ultimately, of Socrates? As bonus content to this course, we will also look at the Sicilian campaign, of which is frequently known as the kind of turning point in which the Athenians went from a sort of up-and-coming dominant city-state to a city-state in decline. This campaign in particular was involved real historical figures that are very much in Plato's dialogues, Alcibiades and Nicias in particular. These characters are used in Plato's dialogues in order to investigate courage or ambition, but they are also real historical figures which we can read about. And we can speculate, therefore, on the real historical conditions of Plato's time, and therefore make certain implications or assumptions about how Plato is responding to those events, how Plato is responding to seeing his city-state, Athens, go into a decline, lose the Peloponnesian War, go through the catastrophe of the Sicilian campaign. What can be learned from these real historical events and real historical characters? Why is Plato incorporating them into his dialogues? What does Plato want to do with this? How does Plato want us to think of these historical events and historical characters in the larger task of philosophical praxis and philosophical education? This all encompasses what I'm referring to as Plato's elite pedagogy, and the understanding of Socrates as a kind of pedagogical martyr, and an understanding of the larger political ambition of Plato himself is inseparable from this task of cultivating and designing an elite pedagogical method. This course would be extremely insightful for anybody who would like to view these Platonic dialogues through this unique framework of an elite pedagogical method. Anyone interested in education or the philosophy of education, anyone interested in elites, rulers, how they're cultivated, what virtues they should or shouldn't have, anyone interested in the history of ancient Greece and ancient Athens, and would like to study that history again through a more philosophical light, particularly the philosophical frame I'm giving here, anyone in that category would find this course extremely interesting. I will leave the links to the course in the description. Thank you.